Hello everyone, Master Xeon1001 here, and in our previous video we set this up for a render, and in this video we'll be breaking it down. So let me make sure that screencast keys is enabled, and we'll press Ctrl-Alt spacebar in order to get out of full screen mode where we're back to our object. So we have our first layer or collection that has basically our scene, we have our second collection that has our high mesh, and then after that is cutters, which is of minimal importance. In fact, just to better clean up, we're going to move everything to the right cutters collection and just delete that collection. So that way we only have 3. And then we'll add a new collection called low. And this is where we'll begin our work. So we're just going to duplicate pieces over to the low and then start getting to work. So let's go ahead and enable grid, end of floor, X and Y. Also turn our origins back on. We probably don't need relationship lines, but we definitely don't need all of these lights. So there is a mistake made where all of our lights are placed on the wrong layer. So I'm just going to select all of these lights, including its main empty. We're also going to place that on the SCN. And we also want to make sure our empty is placed there as well. And just double checking to make sure that nothing else unacceptable is on our high. So we look at 1, it's our render. We look at 2, it's our high. And 3 is our low. So, with further ado, let's begin. So I'm going to first Control-Shift-S, and we're going to increment the save by 1, making this piston06_3 on my side, but in the YouTube chronology, the order is different because of the videos that were chosen. So I'm just going to Shift-D, duplicate this, we'll move it over to low. As far as high goes, we can just hide it because we won't be coming back for it. And let's just remove all of our support loops because they're not needed, not a single one. And let's just jump through this. So part of my goal with these is to be less intense on cylinders and their reductions, because I think that, you know, it's not helping our bakes, but some of these loops that we're removing could probably be very assistive to the bake cage itself. So let's just select everything, and then all of these, 1, 2, 3, to have this one as our last, we could press M, merge it at last, and we're looking so far so good here. In fact, we can also press Alt V, turn on our wireframe just to look at our wireframe. We already have Verti-Merge on, so that means the party is already started. We can just grab all this geometry, maybe turn off see-through mode because it's just not helping. Dissolve, rebuild, and even all these extra loops that are present, just not needed. At this point we can also have our statistics enabled so we can see what our poly count is, and we'll just continue working accordingly. So I'm just going to select everything here, select this as my last point, merge it last, and we are done. So just really simplifying this geo quite harshly, but it takes a heavy hand sometimes. Still looking at it, you know, this little trench that we added, probably not needed. And so far so good. Let's enable Autosmooth at least at 30 degrees on this just so we can see things looking correct. And I'm also going to go ahead and create the UV material. So if you're familiar with the ways I've done it before, I just hack HardOps where basically I add a UV project modifier while holding shift in order to add the grid material. And then we just select the empty that it creates and delete it, and also delete the UV project modifier because we do not need it. And now whenever we press Alt V and we go to solid texture toggle, we can actually see what we're looking at. So I'm just pressing U to unwrap. It doesn't matter, we're not truly unwrapping at this point, but let's jump over to the high. We're going to duplicate the body, move it over to the low. We should also deal with naming at this time, but we're not. And let us just begin breaking this mesh down. So as I've said in the past, you know, triangles a lot more acceptable in my life than you would believe. However, n-gons are definitely kind of hold the phone geometry where I look at it like holding a call until it's time to actually handle it, and now is the time that we actually get in and handle these things. So we're just getting in, dissolving loops, taking care not to compromise our shape. In fact, we could use sharpening just to accentuate the areas that are of great importance, but let's just do it by eye. I feel like I have a pretty good grasp on which edges need to be removed today. Just sliding to dissolve. You know, Retopology, one of the greats, let me tell you. We're going to dissolve that edge, not needed. This edge isn't needed, contributes nothing. This one contributes nothing, it can go. Goodbye. For this area, we will need to make a few determinations. For example, we want to merge all that at center. We can select this edge, get rid of it, and just take a look at what we're dealing with. We're just sliding around, performing great reductions, very heavy reductions. But one thing I do want to try to do in some of these future studies is, you know, keep the circles better, because I tend to simplify circles to their most minimal geo, which does work against me come time to export and bake, because the circles have lost so much resolution that their load just looks terrible. So I do want to kind of break myself of that habit, but just continuing on. We could also hit this with a decimate and then clean up the survivors, but I find that a manual touch can also be beneficial with these sort of things. So it doesn't always require that we come in looking for a optimal solution or more optimized. I mean, there's a ton of ways we could have broke down this mesh. In fact, we should probably explore the decimate route sometime, because it would have been a great simplifier on this. In fact, the opportunity is still present. We could decimate this thing at any time in order to take this mesh to a different starting point. But let's just continue, you know, not get distracted with the allure of alternative workflows. And really with this area is a curiosity. All right, and that ended up merging. And I'm going to try to avoid getting on the topics that I got into on the very first actuator video of this series, because I just got really off topic to the point I felt I had to just remove that video in order to keep it focused on the task at hand. But I can't resist the urge of speculating what it would be like if we were capable of interplanetary travel. But shaking my head, we'll remain focused. So with this whole area, so much to do. But Retopology, the great equalizer, no doubt about it. Just something about sliding edges to dissolution is just fantastic to me. Even though I feel that we could have used circle select and grabbed everything and press M, merge to cursor, or merge to center actually, and just deal with any stragglers. So let's select everything, remove doubles just in case there are any. It looks like we're doing pretty good. No doubles. But we do have a lot more to reduce. You know, everything that we did for reinforcing subdivision, we now have to reduce, because unless we were reinforcing the baking cage, it's unnecessary in my opinion. And what we want to do is just deselect that one and then just perform a great reduction in this area, because a lot of these loops don't even matter. But we do want to keep the integrity of our circle going. and just thinking about some of the alternative options that we denied ourselves but are still available to us. We could still decimate this mesh and get in and begin cleaning up the survivors. It just keeps coming back to me. A little bit of a cluster back here. That's fine. I'm going to get rid of that loop, get rid of that loop. This one is connected to this area. Is it even necessary? Is this one even necessary? You know, this is where I start making some regrettable decisions, but I'm just such a big fan of these terminations and studying how these terminations can still preserve the surface. But I'm a weirdo. We will just dissolve that, and let's look at the back that we have. And I suppose we can actually merge to this area, and we'll keep it for just this time. In fact, we'll give it another loop just for credibility. However, this whole area can begin getting reduced. But we're looking at our poly count, and we see that we're still, you know, in the thousands, so much work to be done. Let's just grow this, Control X. Let's merge at center. We'll dissolve all 4 of these edges, and that is why I use that type of circle. But with any circle, you can just literally grow it and dissolve it out of existence if you have to. Wow, we gave this thing the works, didn't we, when we were putting it together? Well, not we, me. This thing received the works as far as loop reinforcement, you know, just the spa package of loop protection. You know, we protected everything, which is why we are having to reduce so much. We could have also kept the construction mesh and built our low from that, but there's always differences that make that not the most optimal decision as well. And then in the end, I find myself having to do this level of just refinement just to get things under control. So we'll avoid moving that one, but we'll slide these other 2 in order to remove them. And so now it's just a matter of us taking this to the next junction, taking this to the next junction, taking this to a junction. We can requad that. This loop no longer has to exist, which still leaves that in an all quad predicament. And we have a lot of cleanup to be doing here. So not really a lot, I suppose, because with anything flat, flatties, I just look at flatties as easy outs. You know, if it's all flat, you better believe I'm just going to turn it into a plane. But we do have a couple of loops on the side, so let's merge at center. Then we bring it over, and if we press Alt-V and turn off wireframe, and we also have this with Autosmooth on, we can see kind of what we're going for, which is basically nothing. It's like we're almost doing nothing at all. And for this area, how do we want to do this? Do we still want to keep the holes? Are the holes going to be useful for us being real geometry whenever it comes bake time? We'll just have to find out. Let's merge at center, and we could quad all of this real simply. We might as well merge at center, just dissolve these edges in order to quad it. And something like that is a lot better, or at least a lot more reduced. And then from here we can start eating our perimeter lines. You know, they were good to us when it came to sub D, but now they are not needed. So with this area, it's definitely a ponder as to how we want to resolve this. We could just leave it and do something like that and just go around it, which might also not be a bad idea. We'll slide this over, and we want to get rid of this entire loop. Let's try that again. Yeah, I just wanted to see exactly how we're doing with it, because sometimes such large moves unchecked are mistakes. Just waiting to reveal what you've mistakenly done to your mesh. So for this, we are going to just take it next door, and then we're going to take that next door, resulting in something like this, holding this area together. And we could also do a convergence reduction of that as well. This area is a reinforcement, so we can also slide it out of existence. Pretty much the only hotkeys I'm pressing besides select and control clicking is double G in order to slide it out. But like I've emphasized, there are definitely more effective ways to get your mesh to this simplified point than the ways that I'm showing. And I definitely implore users to explore those ways. So let's double G, slide it, we'll double tap, we'll form a connection there, and we're looking at 1,000 points so far. And really we don't want to let the points be our determination factor of when we're done. The mesh and seeing that all the irrelevant loops that are not needed are no longer present is actually our determining factor. So does this loop actually contribute, or can we slide this here, grab all of these and slide them in order to converge and reduce that area? So, you know, if we do a good job, whenever we go back into object mode, it should just look like the mesh just has no subdivision. Nothing should really change with the way that the form is. In fact, if we look inside, I see a lot of just extra loops. Something like that is a little more acceptable to me. And you see I keep revisiting these areas, hitting them just a little bit harder. It's like, who's going to look there? Who's going to look there? We could also change our Autosmooth to something like 60 so it just looks cooler, which is an opinion. But visually, I like to let Autosmooth be assistive towards understanding, wow, look at us, we left that. We left this entire chain of useless verts. We'll deselect these two, slide these in, and just take a look at what we have. We're just going to merge these at last, because sliding it into itself to correct it was just too many maneuvers at that second. So this area is also a little bit of a mess. You know, if we can't read what the geo is saying, we need to make it say a little bit less. In fact, you know, as I look at it, I just see more and more reductions that can be done. And I actually enjoy the art of reducing very much. It's one of those things I could actually do all day, because the reward is just immediate. You know, it's just you holding the form, and we do have an all quad flow happening there. Just double checking, and this area looks like a confirmation point, meaning that it can be renegotiated. But for what we're dealing with, how do we want to reduce this? We could reduce this like so, we could reduce it like that, and this is all a big flatty area, so these sort of reductions aren't completely terrible solutions. You know, we just want to get rid of any extra loopage that doesn't have to be here. But it's hard to decide which ones are being assistive to other loops and which ones are excessive, especially as we get further and further in our reduction process. And when it comes to the naming of high and lows, there used to be a tool, I believe, by Paul Lazowski that was pretty great. However, I don't know if it's a thing anymore. I think I was using it in 2.79, but I'll have to check up on it. This loop is irrelevant. You know, it took me a moment of looking at it, but this loop can go, which means this part can go, which means this entire part can go. But, you know, like I said, if we slide things without looking at what we're sliding and ensuring that the results are coming out somewhat acceptable, you know, we have mistakes that we have to deal with. For example, in this area, we're just going to right click, subdivide, create a point, and we're just going to merge that point here and then connect it there, just giving us something a little bit more reduced, but also a little bit better topologically. Just thinking about this real hard. You know, I want to do something like that, and then, you know, form a connection down this cylinder. I know, regrettable stuff, but it does allow us to just get rid of this loop. And I'm telling you, it's such a hard mental battle to just not go overboard when it comes to solving this, because it's so easy. I could just jump everything to its nearest junction and just call it a day. But for getting rid of this, you know, what are we at what cost? You know, how much geometry are we saving? Probably not a lot. But if we look at it, we see that we're still holding our form together, and this area has definitely received a fair amount of reduction. I'm rotating around just so I can evaluate if these edges that we're looking at are actually useful to the areas that they're connected to. But we definitely also want to make sure that we have a proper connection with our surfaces, or else the overlap will punish us on the UV, and we don't want to deal with that either. The day is already long enough without us adding additional nonsense to have to quarrel with. So let us grab these loops. We'll GG slide. We'll grab these, GG slide. And I'm going to grab all of this, and we'll also slide that out. And just looking at this area, I just see nothing but extra loops that aren't needed. And according to our poly count, we are now sub 1,000. So we're definitely on the way to the finish line. All right, we'll reduce it like so. You know, had to give it a hard think there for a second, but only a second. We'll slide here, basically allowing that to be reduced. And so far, so good. We should save the file, just in case Blender wants to torment us, or not torment us, but test our, you know, what would Takeshi69 say? Test our gangster. You know, Blender likes to sometimes crash and just test to see if you are tough enough to just get back in there and finish what you're doing, or if you're gonna let Blender splash you in the face with some water and chase you away from your computer. Or at least that's how I look at it. When Blender crashes, I'm like, oh hell no, you ain't gonna do me like that, man. I'm gonna get in there, you know, forget sleep. Sleep just got off the menu. It's just you and me, Blender. But yeah, I always will get in and give it a battle. Luckily, I don't have the type of spouse to stop me from doing such things. Be like, you must come to bed. You must now. Just kidding. But I would. So looking at this area, it's like, how do we want to reduce that? Well, I'm going to dissolve this. I'm going to go all the way around. And we're also going to remove that. And we do want to maintain the integrity that we've built in this area. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, fifth point. So let's turn these two into quads, which basically turns that into a quad. So our reduction is nearly complete. You know, it's a philosophical question as to whether it's worth it or if you would have rather use some sort of automated attempt solution, but for me, I often find that sometimes it's just best if I just handle things myself in order to get the results that I'm after. So a little more reduction, just because, you know, we're not learning. And just looking at what we have here, and I'm going to just add that point, which means that we can form this connection, ending that process. And really it's unnecessary, but we're in here. Another thing is that this circle is not round enough. It just isn't. So I'm going to press P, separate it, and we are just going to hit it with a level of subdivision. But before applying it, I'm going to apply creases to all of the marked areas, and let's just apply it. So we want to dissolve any loops that are irrelevant, and for this piece we can actually scale it up on everything but the Y, or yeah, S, Shift, and Y in order to scale it up. And I don't even want to deal with all that. Let us go in and just form our connection and be done. In fact, we can just select both loops, select this loop, and in the edge menu of right click we can choose bridge edge loops, which will bridge it in a uglier way, but we now at least have a rounded circle for that area. So like I said, I'm not trying to let my circles get brutalized, and just can't resist the urge to just try. And I almost feel like we can grab this entire edge and jump it over as well, but we also have a little garbage happening. So let us remove our doubles, and we remove one. Let's slide it up till it's at least 2. We will never know what that second point removed was, but like I said, sometimes I will gamble. I'll just see, like, which point was it? Will I discover it later in a catastrophe? And for this area is of a particular type of curvature. I don't know if we want to sacrifice that, or if it's even the best choice. But we look at our shape and we're now at 665 verts, meaning that we're at 1200. So let's give this the same material that we did with the other one. And let's also name this material just UV. And we want to remove any other materials. And just to get the party started, let's just hit it with a HardOps UV or the auto unwrap in order to just unwrap it very quick and give us some, you know, kind of whatever UVs. And let us now jump over to this layer and begin dealing with some of the final parts. So luckily this was cloned here, but this area will need to be addressed. So let's bring everything back that's in this layer. This was one of our old pieces we attempted. We could just delete that. We don't need it. And so we just have to resolve what's going on here. And there's a couple of ways we could go about it. I was going to just start breaking that stuff down, but you know, we do want to do that. So let's duplicate this, move this over to our low, and on our low we'll just go in local mode and just have a talk with this mesh. GG, GG. And subdivision doesn't have to be present because, you know, as we reduce it, subdivision is going to be less and less happy with us. We also don't need the mirror, but I need the mirror, you know, for emotional support. So let us just slide over and reduce, reuse, and recycle, because we're all Planeteers. And just thinking about how we want to do this reduction, you know, we could just kick this thing down 10 flights of stairs like I just did on one side. Let's press Alt X, and we can actually mirror that work to the opposite side. In fact, there's one additional loop present that isn't needed, and it is here. So let's just use machine symmetrize because we have local rotation happening with this piece. We can just press U, unwrap, not CRUVs because these are image editors and not UV image editors. So Alt M, UV, we are done. So now the final piece, this piece. I was going to do something special with it, or simplify this whole thing to be just a cylinder, but I was thinking, you know, if I do that, it's probably going to show the gaps in the bake, and I just don't want to deal with that. So it's easier for us to just do it right. You know, we went so far, why cut ourselves short? So just dissolving, hitting the 30 minute mark content in this video. So let's select this piece, jump around, we'll press X and delete it. Let's Alt M, slap it with a UV, and we'll also just under mesh tools, auto unwrap it just to give it some, you know, kind of whatever UVs. And let's go back over and let's just hide everything that we've dealt with. You know, we dealt with all the hard stuff. This part, is it hard? Probably not. You know, we remove the subdivision, take it in local mode, and we see that, you know, we have a party. So center, dissolve, dissolve. Let's dissolve, and you know, I should probably try decimate with just one mesh just to see how it could be reduced, but I'm just going to press E, S to scale, merge at center, and just making sure there are no additional points happening that are not needed. So I do care about these circles enough to not reduce them out of existence, but we do want to cut down this poly count a little bit. We're at 332, really excessive. And outside the circle, you know, outside the circle, I was found myself caring for a second. In fact, we probably have to care a little bit. You know, I was about to make a joke about not caring, but let's undo that. And we want to set our pivot point in the correct location. So I'm going to select these 2 points, and we'll press Shift S, origin to selection, and we'll just Alt X, bisect mod, or actually, yeah, bisect mod. Let's try it again. I'm off today. Alt X, Alt Scroll to bisect mod. We'll hold Shift and then click it twice in order to mirror on both the axes that we care about. Sorry about that. Sometimes I'll have a geriatric moment where my fingers will just get out of control. And looking at this, I say we've done the Lord's work. So let us press Q, auto unwrap, and these UVs are something straight out of the Necronomicon, but we will talk about that later time. So now for this piece, I was thinking, man, this one's going to be fun. You know, fun's a word for it, right? So we're over here on the low. Let's take this in local mode, and we have 9. So 9 times 4, we're going to be looking at 32. So should we just build it super low, or should we maintain the same amount of curvature that we have in our initial shape? How should we do this, guys? I'm going to first remove subdivision, and then we're going to hit it with a decimate. So we can Alt V, look at this wireframe, and we see that the decimate did a kind of cruel job to it. And as a result, we're going to have to go in there manually. I'm torn between just remodeling it using 24s and 12s to show a point, but forget making a point. But anyways, the point is that, you know, I always merge cylinders of a certain size, and it's to prove a point, but you know, you can actually merge any cylinders of any size together, but it is going to definitely be a struggle. And it's just all about if you want to try to go through that, or if you're just like me and you're just trying to get to the end. So we're just consolidating, reducing, and for this area, this is where it begins to get interesting. And by interesting, I mean it's already over. You know, you missed the party. This edge seems kind of important, so we'll let it stay for now. But we're going to slide this one over, maybe to something like that. Let's see. Such a conundrum. Double tapping G. So let us also turn on Autosmooth just so we can see this with proper shading. We don't need to wireframe to look at it outside of edit mode. And just thinking about what we can reduce, and we're already at 75 points and we have no poly count goal. So that means we are done. However, this loop on the inside I feel should be rebuilt to the outside. So something like that is at least a little bit more acceptable to me visually. And just thinking about how I want to deal with this, because I feel like we got a bit of a mess of geometry happening around the circle. And we could at least have some pretty looking geometry for this area. But we are sacrificing some of our roundness, moving pieces around. So we do want to maintain the integrity of our cylinder and not reduce it too much. So just looking at it, pondering which route I want to go. And really, I think we are done here, unless we want to get super obsessive. Let's Alt-V, look at the wireframe. Let's go under Mesh Tools and hit it with the Auto Unwrap. And this is our result. So right now we're at 2,343 vertices, which isn't bad at all. All right, back in the game. So now we only have a few pieces, well, a few pieces, look at me, trying to be optimistic. Let's duplicate this and move this over to it. We'll also hide it from the high, which is unnecessary, but we're going to remove the subdivision and we're going to remove the bevel and we're going to apply to triangulate and just take a look at what we have and just ponder if there's something better we could do. I mean, we can Alt-J just to correct the ones that were right in front of our faces, but let's go out of local, look at our low, and I'm thinking unless we want to reduce this and sacrifice part of our form, which is just unnecessary, that is actually acceptable. So just like that, we have finished that piece in mere seconds. The hard part though is going to be this. So I'm going to, alright, so they do share their origin. I'm going to just Shift G, move these to low, and on the low, we're going to grab this one and then select this one, Control L, link the object data. And this means that whatever we do to this one will modify the other one. So first things first, sub D out of here. Let's try using decimate. Decimate has to be useful. And I'm just trying to press Control A to apply, but something's messing with me. Let us just use modifier apply. I'm not sure why I wasn't able to apply that modifier, but all we're doing via mirroring is just reinitializing our edges to be on the side, and we can just come back with a triangulate in order to just call it a day. I mean, if we really want to just simplify it to that level. However, before that, let us remove these edges that we've created and then look at what we have, and something like that is a little bit more acceptable in my eyes. We can remove that, and that piece has now been reduced, and we look at these and let's remove our subdivision, but we want to keep our mirror, and it looks like they're not linked. So let's try that again. Control L, link object data, and now these are all linked together. So we'll be baking one and then it'll propagate to the rest of them. So that means we can hide these, and that leaves us with just this washer, which we probably could deal with as part of this screw, but since it's being multi-used, we don't have that luxury. So let's just remove our bevel, and with these two, I'm just going to press I and then delete the faces. So that way when we come out of local mode, it looks as if it's hollowed out, but really it still has enough to capture some AO. Let's select all of these together, and we're going to Alt-M, give them the UV material, and then under Mesh Tools, we're going to just hit it with the Auto Unwrap just to give it a UV set just for this moment. For this area, we're probably going to have to redo it, or not redo it, but make some adjustments in order to make it accommodating to those parts. We're not going to be dealing with the label. That washer is out of the running, and so now we're down to these pieces. So when it comes to cables, if we shift deduplicate them and take these into local mode, we can take the subdivision modifier off of them both, and then when we go into adjust curve, just control rolling will reduce the amount of loops that's going up and down on the U. And we'll do the same thing with this, just control roll to reduce the loops till we start sacrificing a little bit of our curvature. The other thing is how many verts around we are. So this area is kind of small to me. So we're just going to reduce our resolution, maybe to 2. And we'll still leave them as curves. Let's Alt-M, hit it with the UV, which these don't get UVs unless we check something to give them UVs, I believe, but it's not needed. So we see that we're holding it all right, except for this one. We probably want to give it a few more spans, and for this one, we just want to at least ensure that we are fitting our wire. We'll maybe make some changes just so we have something that shows up in the normal map. Otherwise, what are we talking about? So let's just move this to low. Let's select this one, move it to low. That means these are eliminated. This one is a washer, and this one is a washer. So let us shift D. We'll move these to low. And we just created a washer. So on both of these, I am going to remove subdivision and bevel, of course. We'll give it a UV material, but we'll link it to this object data. And we won't be needing that for baking either, but it's just good to have those knocked out of the way. So really there's not a lot left with this, and we should be finishing very shortly. This piece is just, oh geez, this is a piece that's worthy of retopology. But let's pretend retopology isn't an option. Let's duplicate it, we'll move it to low, and all this is just this piece. So I'm just going to apply to solidify, and first thing is we got to get rid of any interior geometry. And I was thinking about just retopologizing this, but we can probably perform enough reductions to close the case on this. In case you don't remember, this was built using the cable eraser insulate function that is added as of the latest update. Really cool feature, but now we are paying the price. Sometimes a little automation comes at a price, and you don't know what that price is until this point. Now we are well aware of the price, enough to think cautiously about using insulator for results that we're going to be downpacking. So we're just sliding and sliding and sliding. And I probably should set up a macro on my mouse for GG, but I always tell myself, I'm not going to be doing this again. It's a lie though. I might be right back doing it. I was actually planning on doing a video about the unwrap of Hydraulic 3, which was one that was utilizing both decals from Decal Machine and also just general modeling, which I felt would be interesting to show how you would get something like that in Substance Painter. However, as I attempted to get it in Substance Painter, it showed me that I don't know how to get it in Substance Painter, so I actually probably got to write Machine an email saying, what's up, man? How's this thing work? So that I can show people how it works. But it'll be a fun one. Also, being able to export decals out of Blender is probably one of the more important features of Decal Machine to master, because the decals look so great in Blender. It always breaks my heart to not see them over on the Substance Painter side of things. And we're just pacing around this maze, just chatting, just moving around, just talking. Nothing serious. We got 494 verts. Whenever we give up, the amount left is how many bullets we are pointing at the rest of our mesh, but I'm thinking under 5,000 we can deal with on this, and it shouldn't be that hard of a struggle. So maybe something like this. In my head as I do this, I do ponder a future of tutorials where basically I'll be, recording this and then, playing it back at 500x, and then we'll just talk about it instead of having to actually take you through the entire process, because I feel like it's been expressed clearly by now. And so, further videos on these topics are becoming more and more redundant. I feel that as this content deepens, there should be more able to be taught through time lapses where I take on more engaging things, because I can't stress it enough, but it takes a lot of brain power to continue talking as I'm working. I feel that there are others out there who are definitely much better at it than myself, but look at this area, just so heavy. And it looks like we have been set up by Cablerator for an easy dissolve on this, because if you look at every other edge is inadequate, which isn't that bad of a choice to have to make. It's like, oh yeah, I can get in there and dissolve every other edge. But let's Alt V and just look at our solid shape, and still more reductions able to be had. We'll grab these as well and just slide them over to the end. No one will notice, right? However, if we get too far off from the initial cage, then it's going to just get weird for us. So I'm also keeping that in mind as well, even though I've really been pushing the shape to the max. But to me, I'm just having a conversation and talking to you guys about modeling while reducing. So let's just select everything, remove my distance, and let's just call it, because we could go on that all day, but we're at 3065, so we are not in the worst shape. We can really get to the end of this and wrap it up nicely. So I'm going to 1, 2, 3, 4. So for some reason I felt like I was selecting multiple ones at the same time. And so for all of these, we want to remove subdivision. And then link them, as far as object data is concerned, to the same mesh. So after we give it UVs and we go in and actually reduce this mesh, it's a lot more manageable. And just looking on the inside, making sure there's nothing there, but we sure gave it a lot of subdivision reinforcement, didn't we? And we'll go ahead and reduce these because they'll look very nice when they're baking in. However, the urge to slide that edge is so great, and it's so great of a mistake that we shouldn't make it. Ooh, I'm selecting the wrong point. And we completely destroyed this side. So let us rebuild it. Maybe to something like that. And that would explain why this area was looking a little strange. So I think we are looking pretty good, aside from a few additional reductions that are possible. I mean, why not? This area is never going to be looked at. Who will be inspecting my geometry so close that they'll think I needed a point there? God himself. Just kidding. So we come out and we look at this and we see that all of these pieces look great, but with our one piece we will auto unwrap, which gives UVs to everything. So that means these 4 can now be eliminated, and that leaves just this area to deal with and this area. And so let us just duplicate them both, move it to low, and we see that for this to work, we are going to need just a little bit more. And because we modified that object data, it should modify, let's see, where's the other piece? I think we're looking at this upside, there we go. We've been looking at it upside down. It gets like that. It just looks like that now. So we just want to make sure that we're on the same page. We are going to select both of them, link their object data, Alt-M, give them a UV material, and let's also remove the subdivision modifier from that. And let me pause for just a moment. All right, maybe we can complete this entire operation or finish completing this process before we get to the 1 hour mark. So to do that, I must focus. That doesn't mean I gotta stop talking. It just means I have to reduce these areas and then mirror them across. Same thing there. We can select this point, grow it out, maybe like so, press E, S, M, center, and so far so good. You know, let's enable Autosmooth so that way we can see what's the truth. This part is not the truth, which is why it's gone now. For this edge, we are just going to just converge these at their nearest corners just to reduce them. I know, I'm so aggressive with my solving, but we look at this and that is a nut in the same form as our previous one. Like I said, I derive a amount of enjoyment from this process. Let's go back to our low, and for this piece we never auto unwrapped it, nor did we give it a UV for what it's doing. For these two, let's just turn them into meshes so now they display their UVs. That's always good. And let's Alt-H and bring it back, and let's look at our low with our high and really think about how we want to handle this. So I'm thinking that we can just grow this part, maybe one loop prior to the top. Let us press Inset in order to reduce it to fit the area that we're going for. E, Alt-S, just to bring it in. And we only have one opportunity to do Alt-S properly, and then the second time you use Alt-S, it will not go the way that you want it to. Alt-S is a weird one, but the first time you push things by the normals, it's just a dream. The second time, you're waking up from the dream a little bit. You're aware that there's a dreamlike state going on that is happening. And also, do these loops need to exist? I mean, we could reduce them, but is it necessary? It probably is not. So if we look at this, we've now dealt with everything except for we probably want our mirror mods to be before our subdivision, so that way things look great. So here's our high, here's our low. If we toggle off solid toggle, we could look at them back and forth. With this one, you know, let's lower the auto smooth back to 30. So that way we can see them comparatively, and this is our result. So with that, we can now move on to the exporting and baking portion of things. However, one thing I'm noticing is that these rings, in comparison with the version that we're looking at, is a little bit lower. So I'm going to press period and change my pivot point to individual origins, and we're going to scale on everything but the X. And that will give us something like that. So now let us go back and forth between the two. Also look at them together just so we see what they look like as far as overlap is concerned. And I would say not bad at all. So we can now wrap this for now and move on to the next stage, which is UVing, export, and baking.